America's southern border poses a huge security threat to the interior of the United States. One could view it as the soft underbelly of America, a place where America's enemies could exploit a critical weakness. However, the threat that is being posed is completely misunderstood and greatly politicized. There are very real and legitimate concerns, however they're often completely drowned out from rhetoric by left and right-leaning politicians. Let's take a look at the actual threat being posed here. Then we'll hit on how the rhetoric is actually making this situation a heck of a lot worse. And we'll wrap up with what could actually be done here, because it's not unsalvageable. The US has a massive southern border. It's one of the longest international borders in the world, spanning 1,954 miles. On the other side of the border is Mexico, which has significant security issues themselves. Much of northern Mexico is either under the control of or being contested by various drug cartels, which are capable of outgunning the uniformed Mexican military. The economic disparity across the border makes this situation even worse. It's not even about the situation immediately across the border. It's what happens further south, as far as Central and South America, which is also deeply relevant to this issue. Things might have seemed bad here in the United States in the past decade or so, but we have it very nice here. And people are still wanting to move here to the United States to better their lives and enjoy the different freedoms and options that we have as Americans. So hundreds of millions of people attempt to cross the US border every year in hopes for a better future. People not only from Central and South America travel great distances to reach the US border. People from around the world also make the trip. People from Asia, Africa, and Europe all have had encounters on the border with Border Patrol, indicating larger groups from these areas have made similar journeys. And this is where the US has its first failure. The US immigration system is poorly equipped to handle large influxes of new immigrants, combined with poor infrastructure along the border. Not only is the US immigration system poorly equipped to handle spikes in immigration, it's by design that the US cannot accommodate larger numbers of new immigrants. The Immigration and Nationality Act allows the US to only grant up to 675,000 permanent residence visas each year. This creates a pretty giant bottleneck of the number of people that are even legally allowed to become citizens in the US each year. And even then, those that are able to meet these requirements are still pretty stringent. For instance, you need to be either married to a US citizen, have a job in the United States that requires you to live in the US, get refugee or asylum status, or be an investor or have the ability to create jobs in the United States. Even so, every year, there are millions of people that enter into the United States without documentation or even the ability for the US government to grant them a visa. This is all made much worse by what I think is the second key failure here in the United States about this issue: misunderstanding and misclassification of the issue. People are fleeing conflict and economic catastrophes. Many families fleeing places like northern Mexico have more in common with a Syrian refugee than they do other immigrants, and that's assuming that that other immigrant isn't also a Syrian refugee, which is just as possible. With the rising number of illegal immigrants entering into the United States every single year, this is how we find our third critical failure of the United States so far. And it's both a political failure by both parties in the US government, but it's also a social failure by the American people. Fear-mongering over these immigrants, specifically the belief that they're criminals, which is something that's been stated repeatedly by multiple high-profile US politicians, has fueled concern that these immigrants are coming to destroy America with crime and drugs. It's a reductive accusation that places blame on victims of crime and drugs and not on the people that are actually creating these conditions and exploiting the porous border to make money and gain power. And so oftentimes the desire to fix this situation has reverted just to broad deportation. But this would include deporting millions of people, most of which being women and children, back into conflict zones and areas run by criminal groups, as well as economically depressed areas. This would be a grave moral failure by the United States, and it would greatly contradict the very values of the United States of being a beacon on a hill and a place for people to go to better the options for their families and better the outcomes for their families. And unfortunately, this isn't just something that a major political party here in the United States has been advocating for, it's something that a lot of Americans have been calling for. The whole issue is something that America's enemies can and likely are exploiting in a couple of ways. Both have very real impacts on the United States and its national security. First, a porous border with a severe lack of accounting is the perfect place to infiltrate into the United States. Whether those infiltrators are members of terrorist groups waiting to conduct attacks or engage in organized crime to make money, or whether they're assets of rival intelligence agencies moving in to establish an intelligence network, monitor dissidents, or conduct acts of sabotage. Second, the rhetoric about the border and its politicization of it are perfect opportunities for information operations. All they have to do is just increase the temperature for this conversation. They don't even have to really push this conversation in a particular direction, although it might help to do so just to increase the temperature nature, like I said just now. It's not necessarily about advocating one side or the other. It's about increasing distrust between Americans and each other and their government, as well as those entering into the United States. And that's where the bot accounts on social media come in. Commenting escalatory rhetoric or creating pages where users can be further radicalized in a specific direction. And there's no better time to do it than around a major US election. The US isn't alone in having a controversial debate over immigration. In fact, if you think it's contentious here in the United States, you haven't seen anything. You should see Europe. For instance, in the United Kingdom, influxes of immigration have led to a rising Muslim population. This has led to tensions between conservatives who aren't a fan of this change and the Muslim population that's oftentimes fleeing places like Iraq or Syria. Meanwhile, bad actors like Russia look to exploit this situation. This happened when a report hit British social media channels that a Muslim refugee has stabbed 3 girls at a dance school. While police confirmed that this story was in fact false, the man that stabbed the girls was not a Muslim refugee, he was some guy from the UK, the cat was already out of the bag. Riots ensued with rioters targeting hotels, housing immigrants with Molotov cocktails, trying to start fires. And all of this was being tracked and featured heavily in Russian Telegram channels, who ironically called on the British government to not intervene and allow people to have their freedom of speech, which is pretty ironic. This is one example of how America's adversaries can attempt similar results here in the United States, albeit on a much broader scale. Spreading fake news about violent attacks by illegal immigrants, painting them as rapists and murderers, all in an effort to rile up Americans who aren't fond of immigration or have racist leanings to take action themselves. This threatens not only Americans, but future Americans who are just trying to escape dangerous political situations themselves. It's not all about the information warfare possibilities, though. There are tangible physical security issues here as well. For instance, one article by the New York Times quoted a source in the US military stating that over 1,000 drones fly over the US border every month. Some of those drones track border patrol and help cartels ferry immigrants across the border. Now, we've seen in Ukraine how effective these kinds of drones can be, not only for surveillance, but also for direct action. Imagine a terrorist group hiding among the cartels and using drones to bomb border patrol or a border crossing or a National Guard vehicle. The size of the border and the difficulty in stopping drones make this a huge issue that has only recently begun to manifest in this way. If left unaddressed, it's something that any non-state actor and even foreign intelligence agencies can exploit in any kind of conflict. All of this threatens US security, both with the threat of infiltration by rival intelligence agencies and terrorist groups, but also with the escalating rhetoric here in the United States, fueled by paranoia, racism, xenophobia, with the further meddling of our adversaries. All of this puts us on a very dangerous path where we turn on those who need our help the most, ignoring those who created this whole situation in the first place, while committing grievous violations of what makes America great in the first place. But luckily, we can still fix this issue. It'll take a long time and it'll be expensive, but it is salvageable. First, the United States needs to reform its immigration system. Included in this is the process by which we designate someone a refugee or grant asylum. We need to increase throughput in visas and allowing more people to legally immigrate into the United States where they can fully enjoy the rights as a US citizen or a resident, while also allowing agencies like the DHS and the CBP to know who they are and to vet them prior to entering in. And this will also make it easier for them to get a full-time citizenship by getting a more thorough background check. Second, we need to just chill the heck out. Hysteria over this issue has served absolutely nobody, at least nobody good, and the dismissal of this issue doesn't help anybody either. We have to recognize that this is in fact an issue while not getting mired in xenophobia. America was built to bring people in. It's what makes this country freaking awesome. At the same time, we need to prevent our adversaries from being able to infiltrate in and target the institutions that we hold dear. None of this can happen if we continue to have the rhetoric that we have right now. Increased rhetoric and paranoia makes our enemies' jobs easier because they can further exploit that in the information environment with disinformation and misinformation. It also hurts those that need protection or even into the idea of America because it can better their lives. It hurts all the wrong people for all the wrong reasons, and it's also just super dumb, so like, just chill. Deporting people is expensive, and it doesn't even work because they'll just come back. Plus, it'd be an immoral thing to do because we'd be putting many people right back into unsafe conditions that they had escaped from. Finally, we need to recognize that there's no easy way to fix this situation. I'm just a guy on YouTube. My recommendations may not be the right ones, but there's no quick and easy fix here. But we don't have the luxury of being able to ignore this issue. Something needs to be done here, it's just a matter of what. And whatever it is, it needs to be thorough, lasting, and just. And it needs to be something that our enemies cannot exploit any further, whether that's through direct action or propaganda. There are proposed solutions like mass deportations that could be used in this situation, but those could could certainly be used against us, not only in propaganda, but also by the people that we would be deporting. Like I've said already, it'd be a grievous error. It'd be something that we should absolutely not do, but it would be a moral injury on these people. And so we need to be very careful of something like that. Now, with all that being said, I want to hear your thoughts on this. So comment your thoughts down below. What do you think of this issue? What do you think some solutions to this issue could be? I want to hear your thoughts on this. Like this video to help it reach new audiences. That'll really help enrich this conversation. We need more voices in this space for sure. And subscribe for more content just like this. With all that, I'll see y'all next time. Later.